And welcome to our session, Centering Students. My name is Julia Chamberlin, and I teach French here at the University of Southern California. Well, not here, I'm at my house, but in general at the University of Southern California. And here today, we're going to hear four quick breakout, quick presentations about centering our students. And I'll introduce each one of our discussants when they come up. So they have 5 minutes. So I'm gonna, at minute 4, I'm gonna say 1 minute just because we don't have that much time, and we have some time for questions at the end. But we're gonna start off today with Cooper Brown. Cooper is an undergraduate student at USC, and he's going to talk about trust building and how that drives risk taking, and acknowledging individual experience in student-oriented ungrading pedagogy. So Cooper, hello and welcome, and I'm going to mute myself and we'll hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julia. Yeah, so I'd like to just discuss today a little bit from my own firsthand experience in an ungraded classroom in my freshman year, and just kind of a testimonial to the effects that can have. So last year, I had the rare opportunity of experiencing at the university level an ungraded classroom, and I'd say it's an experience that has permanently altered how I view education. My instructor in this course often used pedagogy on terms like care and co-learning commitments, which we agreed to as students. Our assignments throughout allowed the possibility of unessays. We received feedback, but not concrete letter grades. And at the end, we were told our final grade would be the result of a self-assessment, so on students' behalf. So overall, as someone who, like many other students, we formed these tactics and these kind of procedures that we know will get us that A, just how to perform. This environment at first definitely made me uneasy. When we tackled the first project, there was no thought in my mind that I wouldn't write a standard kind of academic essay. I was like, I know how to do this. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and it took building up the confidence to have a one-on-one discussion with my instructor, who eventually assuaged my fears enough, at least temporarily, to push me to take that risk. And I actually ended up recording, of all things, a podcast episode instead of writing an essay. And by the end of the course, I even went on to write a poetry sort of anthology for my final, which is, I've never written poetry before. I would never have considered doing this, but I had kind of organically grown to realize that maybe my thoughts could be best articulated in ways that were not just your standard essay. So yeah, at the end of the semester, in our self-assessment, I wrote something like, even given the option to stray from the norm, it's hard to take that leap when you have the safety of your known path. And I still agree to that to this day. I think honestly, there's nothing more important than fostering trust between student and instructor if we truly want to commit to restructuring our understanding of education. In psychology, we can consider kind of a tension between changing attitude versus changing behavior. And I think all too often instructors simply take the approach of forcing this change in students' behavior. But this fails to kind of consider the most pivotal element, which is students' own experience and kind of the ways we've been socialized into the graded system. It's so deeply entrenched. And it's not that we don't want to embrace ungrading. I would say it's honestly the opposite. It's that we're completely afraid to do that because I have my tried and true methods to get the A. I know how to write an essay, and I'm going to do the exact same thing every time because it's been proven to work. But as in that course where I experienced that kind of ungrading practice, I was able to build a relationship with my instructor and kind of dissuade the protocol, the regime I had built to execute my learning almost like a program. Like I understand that overthrowing this kind of security that students have can be upsetting on both sides, but I truly believe that trust is the first step in navigating how we might do that. And so in other scholars writing, and I've kind of discovered this term called critical friendship. And I feel like that's an extremely apt term in describing the ideal relationship students and instructors should have. According to the glossary of education reform, one kind of key piece I found is how a critical friend should be encouraging and supportive to students. In my interpretation, that involves forming a mutually supportive relationship, which is predicated entirely on care. And that may seem like common sense, but I think it's all too easy to get caught up in a top-down power dynamic where instructors often push this knowledge to students rather than trying to exist on the same level as them. So I think a critical friend is truly trying to see from that perspective, that student perspective. I would say that trust defines the critical friend and, again, is the most important predicate for that change if we truly want to make it. Thank you. Growing closer with my instructor and feeling that she truly cared about my learning honestly pushed me to take those risks I would have never considered. The podcast, the poetry, things I had never tried before. And I actually had the good possibility that, you know, I might fail at these, but I tried them anyway. So, you know, you have these things like writing the essay where you go, I'm good at it. Why do something different? And I would say the result of that is it was a beautiful feeling being able to articulate my learning in ways I had never before experienced, all because I had built that kind of critical friendship and that relationship with my instructor, and realizing, oh, I can communicate things in a better way than simply in an essay. And so overall, I would just say that's something I'll internalize for the future. And I think it's just a very important thing to consider and for instructors to think about. Yeah.
Thank you, Cooper. We'll ask questions at the end with when everyone's involved. Our next speaker is June Lang. She's from Pomona College, and she's going to talk to us about pedagogical exploration, peer evaluation for student presentations.
Okay, thank you, Julia. And hi, everyone. My name is June Lang, Pomona College Assistant Professor of Chinese. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my recent pedagogical exploration. So traditionally, collaborative grading is about a group of teachers' evaluation of students' work. But more recently, teaching professionals have also suggested that we should invite students to this ungrading process. For example, to use class-generated rubric. So I implemented this in my Chinese linguistics course last semester for students' discussion leading sessions at a liberal arts college. And this class requires students to do readings before class and then engage in class discussions. So students contributed to what they thought were important for students-led discussions. And I share their input here. So you can see that there are some common themes emerging from their input, such as engagement. There are a lot of students talking about engagement, engaging, and also something like organization or structure, organization, preparation. So I sorted them out into two categories for common themes, preparation and presentation. So it looks like students would like to see a review or a critique of the reading covering more than one aspect. And they also expected high quality questions in an organized, concise way, using multimedia resources, and they expected good quality slides and some fun activities. And during the presentation, the student discussion leaders are supposed to be engaging, interactive, smooth, and manage time well. So in class, I shared all these themes with students and clarified some of the items I was unsure about. And then we all reached an agreement on these 10 items. So I put them in a Google Doc form for each student discussion leader. So how did we do this? So after each student's presentation or discussion leading session, other students anonymously filled out the evaluation form on Google based on all the items that we agreed upon. And they also had a chance to put their open-ended feedback to each student leader. So after checking out the result and this feedback, I send them to the student discussion leader so that they can improve for their future presentations. And then I want to share some of the positive and constructive feedback from students. So a lot of positive feedback also emerged talking about how they liked the presentations and some specific engaging elements that they like, for example, using Google Trend to explore or analyze linguistic exchanges. We're using board game to increase fun and engagement and participation. And actually, my biggest fear of using this collaborative grading system before this class was that students will only give each other positive or supportive feedback, but turns out that they also had something constructive to say. For example, if the time management was not ideal, if they did not get enough chances or more chances to discuss or speak, or they have something particular that they disliked, and they also provided some rationale for those. And they also expected something more, like a critique or something other than videos. Overall, I think students enjoy this collaborative grading, and they enjoyed learning from their peers. And this semester, I'm also trying to do this collaborative grading in an intermediate language class. And also ask students to contribute their thoughts for peer evaluation. Thank you. And then this is what they contributed. So I also sorted them out into some basic themes, but because this is only the second week of the semester, students have not yet presented. So I look forward to learning about this process in the language course, and hopefully I can share more with you later. Thank you.
Thank you, June. Yes, great. Thank you. And again, we'll discuss our we'll have questions at the end of the session. Our next discussant is going to be Laura Huffman. Laura, excuse me, is from Loyola Marymount, and she's going to be talking about the ungrading strategy, the translanguaging circle as a space of equity in the French composition classroom. And Laura, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. The French Writing Workshop is a long-standing third-year course at Loyola Marymount. Structured as a global simulation, the students create and develop their own characters who live as neighbors in a single Parisian apartment building. Weekly drafting and revision of compositions builds to the collaborative writing of a crime novel in which each person's character plays an integral role. The course regularly attracts the full gamut of students, from those who've only just finished second-year French and who've never set foot in a Francophone country, all the way to native speakers. Before I stopped grading, I had a few serious difficulties with the course. One, how could a rubric, especially in a writing-intensive course, account fairly, justly, for such disparity in student background and preparation? Where was the starting line when some students had not fully mastered the uses of the three most common past tenses in French, while others dashed off literary tenses? Two, this structural inequity exacerbated the temptation to cheat. Three, fearing getting dinged for mistakes, students were reluctant to take risks with language and imagination, preferring to stick with easy structures they felt secure using. This fear resulted in a novel devoid of any spark. And four, the crime novel consists of 5 chapters, each of which is written by a different group of students. It was tough enough to get them to collaborate productively within groups, let alone between them. With grades in the mix, there just wasn't enough motivation for students to provide each other with substantive help by carefully reading and proposing suggestions for the improvement of each other's sections. And worse, students with less fluency felt unqualified to critique the work of those with greater fluency, while the native speakers complained that they had too much responsibility overall in ensuring a positive outcome. The results tended toward disjointed novels pockmarked by inconsistencies and plot holes. Once I quit grading and students understood that they would not be judged against others whose incoming fluency differed dramatically from their own, my class was better able to embrace collaboration toward a shared goal. And yet, ungrading alone did not fully correct the inequitable structure of the class. At various key points in the process, such as during plot development, or later on as inconsistencies and other serious glitches arise, students must come together to find solutions because the outcome of the novel is their collective responsibility. So one semester, I moved the students out of their usual groups and into a large circle. The goal was for the physical configuration of the classroom to suggest and reinforce the equal stake each person had in the outcome, and allow the whole group to identify, reckon with, and resolve these fundamental problems with the text, and thus create a well-plotted, well-written novel that they all felt good about. Almost immediately, though, I saw my mistake. Instead of realizing my lofty goal of creating community and shared purpose for the group, by requiring everyone to speak French in these circles, I had instead compounded the inequity present in the class by effectively putting the disparity in language levels under a spotlight. When less experienced students produced linguistically awkward statements, others tended to discount the substance of their ideas, which in turn quickly discouraged them from even trying to express themselves. As a result, the less fluent students were unable to participate in as intellectually rigorous and nuanced a way as those who were more fluent. For the purposes of making substantive contributions to the whole group discussion, therefore, I decided to allow students to engage in a form of translanguaging, to speak in whatever mix of French and English they wished, so that the good ideas of the less experienced folks would not be obscured by their weaker command of French. This did the trick. For decades, the idea that French language classes must be conducted entirely in French has dominated pedagogical thinking to the point where speaking English in class feels like failure. I believe we must push back against this lack of nuance and allow our teaching to respond more flexibly to the needs of the specific people in front of us. In the case of the LMU writing workshop, the combination of ungrading and targeted translanguaging ensures that every student feels equally supported and empowered to contribute valuable insights and ideas to the writing project. It also takes the emphasis off the combination between students and places it on the shared objective, writing the best, most cogent and compelling crime novel possible. I'm going to skip a little bit. Anyway, this helps the native speakers as well, because they realize they must move forward equally as the other students do. The first time I tried this dual strategy, the results blew my mind, and they continue to do so. A class with fewer students wrote nearly twice as much as the previous class. They bonded as a group, and their novel was far more coherent and compelling. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was very interesting, and we'll ask questions about that in a minute. But our next discussant is Chloe Papadopoulos from Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And Chloe is going to talk to us about how it's okay to make mistakes and about ungraded quizzes in the language classroom.
Hi, thank you. I hope I'm audible. Okay, so my name is Chloe Papadopoulos. I'm an assistant professor of Russian at Dalhousie University. And I'm going to be speaking today about one kind of ungraded exercise that I've been implementing in my advanced Russian language classroom, which I largely operate within a traditional graded context. And this context often runs up against my frequent assurances that mistakes facilitate learning, making mistakes is part of the process of learning a new language, and it's okay to make mistakes. I found it increasingly difficult to square the course's quantitative evaluative framework with the real-world application of language learning to actually communicate in the target language. And my assurances that mistakes are natural are often uttered at moments in the class when we're not in the midst of evaluation. But even so, I frequently encounter students who are reticent to respond to prompts and questions for fear of saying the wrong thing, of declining a word or conjugating a verb incorrectly, or of forgetting the precise word that they need to express a thought. And this lack of confidence often results in an over-reliance on English. In the case of this particular classroom, the students break out of the target language and back into English, even though I personally know that they can express their thought in the target language, that is in Russian. But they just aren't feeling comfortable with or kind of a natural inclination to circumlocution. So if they're too nervous to make mistakes in our class exercises, then when it comes to tests, they're simply unable to perform. And when I say that, I mean, I have never encountered so many unanswered questions, so many blanks left blank on tests. Earlier, our keynote speaker referenced the way in which traditional grading can impact students' willingness to take risks. This has been an extreme example of that for me. So sensing that my repeated assurances that errors are in fact a necessary reality of foreign language acquisition were not hitting their mark, I solicited feedback on our course design in order to center the students in their needs. I hoped to really be able to find out what I could do to help them succeed in developing their proficiency and a sense of comfort and confidence in Russian. And responses on these feedback forms evidenced a desire for a greater number of low stakes or ungraded evaluations. On the one hand, students noted that they require an external impetus to motivate them to reserve time for the dedicated study of grammar and vocabulary, for example, traditional exams, quizzes, or tests. And on the other, they express concerns about being penalized for making mistakes in such evaluations. And one of the ways that I addressed this feedback was something that I call ungraded quizzes, or kind of clumsily and shakily dubbed in Russian "Tesny na ocenku," in order to meet my students' particular learning needs and to assuage these kind of performance anxieties. I've been administering these ungraded quizzes. That is a traditional quiz format that asks students to demonstrate their grasp of the concepts, those relevant to the course units, such as grammar, vocab, or syntax. I want to basically offer the students an opportunity to succeed in the course through this alternative methodological framework of evaluation. And by offering these practice quizzes, I hoped that they might feel more motivated to study and less afraid to fail. Through taking these quizzes, they could, I thought, see where they needed to improve before our unit tests, while also developing their tolerance for making errors instead of leaving their tests blank. And I think that these quizzes largely have done just that, but in some cases more so than in others. So following up with the students on their experiences of these quizzes, they stated that they were helping with the latter, that is, better understanding where they needed to improve and taking risks, but they weren't really motivating them. So then I had to ask myself, what am I going to do now? And I thought, rewards often motivate people. So how can I reward them and also in turn make our tests less scary for them, our big, evaluated, graded tests? So these ungraded quizzes then became opportunities for bonus points. They can now gain points from them without the threat of losing any points. And these gained points could then translate into bonus credit for their final evaluations, whether those be grammar tests, oral exams, free writing activities. And initially I did this only before the tests, but I've also experimented with giving these ungraded or bonus quizzes after our tests when the group has performed poorly on a target grammatical or syntactical concept. Students have been very grateful for the chance to further practice, to actually learn from their mistakes, or as Meg Malone referred to it earlier in the rubric workshop, to repair, and thereby to improve their overall grade and their accuracy in the target language. Language learning is cumulative, and when we finish a unit, it can give this kind of false idea that we're just moving on, that we've either learned this thing or we haven't. But these quizzes have given students the chance, I think, to really understand a more real world environment wherein we use a language continuously. We have a chance to improve or to flounder without being penalized, the thing that they were so afraid of being. So that's where I'll end. Thank you.